Now, we all know Ghana is working to join countries that are switching to electric vehicles. The aim is to address the problem of emissions that contribute to climate change. To ensure effective implementation, the government has developed a draft National Electric Vehicle Policy and Implementation Framework. Today, the people of the Upper West region are discussing the draft national policy and to make their input. Swala Abdul-wahab is standing by to give us more detail on that meeting. Hello, Swala.
Yeah, hello.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, so what more can you tell us?
Yeah, as you rightly indicated in your intro, the Ministry of Transport is currently holding a stakeholders forum to discuss the draft national policy on electronic vehicles. And the purpose of this policy, according to the government, is to help transition from the use of vehicles that consume fuel or fossil fuel to either battery or other means of source of power. And this is aimed at addressing problems of emissions, which we are told are a major contributor to climate change, not just in Ghana, but across the world. So the representatives of the Transport Ministry have been explaining the draft policy to stakeholders in Wahia, and the stakeholders are made up of various people from the academia to operators of garages, spare parts dealers, a whole lot of people. And the purpose, according to the organizers, is to let them understand what the draft constitutes so that they can make their inputs into the drafts for inclusion. We have one of the officers here who has been explaining the draft policies to the participants. We would like to go over to him to explain what exactly the draft policy constitutes and how feasible he thinks this policy being considered by the government will be possible. Thank you very much for joining us live on Real Time on GTV.
My pleasure. Thanks so much. So, as you were already explaining...
Yeah, so can you tell us your full name and your designation?
All right, so my name is Dr. Ernest Ajiman. I am a senior lecturer at the University of Ghana, Department of Geography and Resource Development. Presently, I'm assisting the Ministry of Transport to draft and to take input from Ghanaians to make the electric vehicle policy a living document.
Yeah, why has this become necessary for Ghana?
It has become necessary for the country to transition to electric vehicle systems because basically we all do appreciate that transport is very important. But then the way we move about is quite key. For some time now, we've had issues with the rising greenhouse gas emissions, of issues with poor ambient air quality. And so all over the world, efforts have been put in place to make sure that we transition to a net zero production of fossilized fuels. And so for some time now, the major actors, the players, the original equipment manufacturers, based on a number of the climate mitigation agreements that they've entered into, have decided that, especially when you go to the advanced leading countries by 2035, they're no longer going to have vehicles that will be emitting or polluting the atmosphere. So basically, vehicles that rely on diesel, on petrol, are no longer going to be produced. That is by 2035. For the rest of the world, they are estimating by 2040, they will no longer produce them. Now, the question would be, if they decide they no longer want these vehicles, where do you suppose they are headed towards? Well, some would say, well, we don't really care. We have a number of issues with power supply and the kind, and maybe you're not ready. So if they don't want it, if they want to phase out, they should then bring it into our country. But the challenge here is that if they're no longer producing the units for us to consume, you could also as well, note that the spare parts will also not be produced. But that it's one of the many reasons why this country should have a policy to guide it. Apart from the fact that those who are manufacturing are no longer going to manufacture beyond 2035, within our own continent, a number of countries have already taken the giant leap towards a transition to electric vehicles. You go to, already as explained in my presentation, you go to South Africa, you have the BYD buses, fully electric vehicles that can do 320 kilometers. That's the range. So that means that once you charge, before the next charge, you'd have done 320 kilometers. When you come to Kenya, you have Basigo, which is locally assembled, fully electrified battery electric vehicles. Also within Kenya, apart from Basigo, they also have the OP bus. These are vehicles, big buses that have been designed, manufactured here in Africa, on the continent. Apart from the high occupancy vehicles, we also have smaller units, the hybrids that people are already using. So the vehicles are already in the system. When you talk to DVLA from 2017 to I think last year, they've registered over 17,600 plug-in electric vehicles. That include the Pragea, the Abubuya, the Okada, two-wheelers, three-wheelers. They're already in the system. Apart from the ones that we are importing, we have Ghanaian business people who are already also retrofitting. What that means is that they're converting the existing petrol and diesel-based vehicles into using electricity.
So let me come in. You said, according to statistics from the DVLA, we have a little over 3 million vehicles in Ghana.
Yes.
What becomes of these vehicles if Ghana switches to electric vehicles policy?
Okay, so the idea is that already there have been some switch already in the system. The fate of the existing ones is that we may give ourselves some gradual phasing period. It's not going to happen overnight. Now, whenever we go around, as we've done in all the 15 regional capitals, now we are waiting to do for Accra. The question has been, when is this thing happening? I can say it is happening in the immediate. I can also say it's happening in the future. What do I mean by that? In the immediate means that already, as I said, we have about 17,600 plug-in vehicles already, battery electric vehicles in the system. Now, given the fact that we are a developing country, given the fact that we also have even chanced upon crude oil that we're also, working on to earn us an income as a country, we're not going to do the transition overnight. So these two parallel systems will exist for a while until gradually it will phase out.
Yes. So, what are the advantages switching over from the use of this fossil power to the electric vehicles as is being driven by the government?
The advantages are quite enormous. To start with, we all do complain, those of us who are driving the petrol and diesel vehicles, we all do complain about rising fuel cost, right? And so one major advantage is that you no longer would buy petrol, diesel any longer.
And is that going to be lesser than what?
Yes, exactly. So initially, the studies that we've done, the initial upfront costs of the electric vehicles are quite expensive. Initially, it used about a ratio of 1:5. So if you're buying a diesel or petrol car, and you're going to buy the equivalent, that same vehicle, this equivalent as an EV version, you may pay about 4 or 5 times the initial price. But now with recent improvements in the technology, especially the battery technology, it has actually reduced. So initially, it used to be around, I think, $250 per kilowatt. Now it has reduced to 120. And chances are that in the recent, in the not too distant future, it may reduce even further to about 75%, $75 per kilowatt. Now, what it means is that the price will keep coming down. You know, initially when you are buying new technologies or when new technology comes, it's a bit on the high side, right? So the initial upfront cost is expensive, but because you're not going to be buying fuel, you're not going to also regularly be maintaining. Indeed, electric vehicles have fewer moving parts compared to what we call the internal combustion engines. And so you do minimal maintenance. So over time, the models that we've run indicate over time, you would actually be, better off than somebody who is using the traditional forms of energy sources for powering vehicles.
Still on the cost, what about the first acquisition of the electric car? How is it?
So as I explained, it's very expensive, one, the battery component. And also as you speak, per our policies, we still treat electric vehicles as what they call luxury vehicles. And so once you import a vehicle to the port, it's very expensive because of the taxes, the levies that we do have. So that's why we're having this consultation. How does the government step in to say, okay, I want to put my money where my mouth, my mouth where my money belongs, right? How do I ensure that we encourage a lot more Ghanaians taking? Can we, for instance, introduce subsidies, right, so that it brings the price down? Can we have other non-monetary incentives? And so we need the views of everyone to put on board so we can have a document or a policy that will serve the needs of Ghanaians.
Apart from the issue of costs, what are the other advantages?
The other advantages certainly relates to the environment, environmental concerns. We've already said that according to the Environmental Protection Agency, emission from the exhaust, the tailpipe of the existing forms of transport constitute the single largest form of pollutant. And so for those of us who are a bit sensitive to the weather changes or to poor air quality, those with upper respiratory infections, talk about bronchitis, talk about asthma, those diseases, once you are exposed to the fumes, the toxic fumes, it's actually killing you, right? According to the World Health Organization, close to about 7 million premature deaths arise from inhalation of these toxic fumes. Now, what I'm trying to say is that if we're able to transition, it will cut down on the emissions that come, the pollutants, and we'll have a healthier environment. So that is one. Apart from that, it's also going to have a lot of business benefits. I must have already introduced or said to you that as a country, fortunately, we've chanced upon the lithium deposit, one of the key components for making the EV batteries. Only last week or two, the sector minister for lands and mineral resources indicated that the government has now rolled out a policy, cabinet has approved a policy to make sure that we can mine this sustainably, maybe add value to it as a country, right? Maybe produce the batteries over here. We don't export in its raw form as we've done over the years of the other minerals. So that by so doing, Ghana can be a hub for electric battery manufacturing, right, from the natural deposit that God has blessed us with. So there are a number of benefits from this.
I'm sure, Doctor, there may be other challenges. What are the anticipated challenges?
Certainly. So basically, the initial upfront cost is a problem, or used to be a problem when we did the survey in Accra, Kumasi, and Tamale. Spoke to some 1,500 Ghanaians randomly. And one of the key issues that came up was the initial upfront cost. I would like to buy it, but I don't have the means. How do I procure? So those are the key issues. Also, people have issues about, the perception that, okay, so if we claim that we have enough power supply, why do we have, sometimes erratic power supply coming in? As I did indicate in my presentation, as we speak, in the month of May of this year, according to the Energy Commission, Ghana has installed capacity over 5,000 megawatts. Meanwhile, averagely, we are using about 3,000. So in terms of the capacity generated, we have a lot. But the challenge now is with the transmission. So somebody produce it, another company, ECG, must also transmit. And that's where we have some challenges. And so efforts are being made to make sure that we streamline on the transmission as well, so that we have stable power supply. We can assure people that, yes, today you may have challenges, but then in the not too long distant future, based on the conversation we had with the Energy Commission, a lot has been done to improve on the electricity stability for us as a country.
So Upper West region is the 15th region to discuss this draft national policy on electric. What do you expect from us?
I'm expecting a very passionate, a very productive engagement. I've seen among the audience persons with disabilities. Their needs are very unique. They need to, let it come out. I've seen people in the security services, fire service, police, and immigration. What are their immediate concerns? So, for instance, they are supposed to fight crime, fight emergencies. What is the range of the kind of EVs that government should promote when we are bringing it into the country, such that it will serve their needs? I'm just wondering a situation where you're going to fight crime or go and put fire out and then your battery runs down. But the point is that given the fact that we're going to import these vehicles, and we are not the only country in this transition, in those advanced countries where they are using them, they also have fire service. They also fight fires, right? They are police, they fight crime. So are we expecting that we'll get a vehicle that will leave us in the middle of the road? Certainly not. So we need all of these feedback from Upper West region so that we can actually have a living document to serve Mother Ghana.
So the whole Ghana is listening to you. What message do you have regarding this particular draft national policy on EV?
So basically the idea is that change is inevitable. No long ago, we all used to power our vehicles or change. The transmission was manual. Now we're talking about automatic vehicles. Those who manufactured a vehicle changed the GS system from manual to automatic. We are all driving them now. But they say that not long from today, they are also going to change the power source from diesel, from petrol to battery electric vehicles. And so as a country, we should position ourselves to really benefit from the transition that is inevitable.
Your name once again, Doctor?
My name is Dr. Ernest Ajiman.
Okay. So you've been listening to Dr. Ernest Ajiman. He's been making a presentation on the draft national policy on electronic vehicle and implementation framework. He is allaying the fears of Ghanaians that Ghana at a point started using automatic vehicles from the manuals. And he is saying that many people are now used to the automatic system of the vehicles. He believes that in the very near future, the switching over from the use of fossil fuel to electric vehicles will also become possible. He is very, very optimistic. Of course, there are some challenges which people are anticipating. So, Doctor, we would like to thank you very much for your time on Real Time on GBC News.
My pleasure.
Thanks for your time.
My pleasure.
We'll join you soon.
All right, sir.
To continue with the presentation.
All right, thank you.
There are participants here that we would like to engage. We also have representatives of the Ghana National Garages. We have people who are also dealing with spare parts. With the change of this system from one to another, there are likely to be challenges. Let's find out from a representative of the National Garages Association what their position is on this. Thank you very much, Mr. Rashid Jinsung, for your time. Yeah, tell us, you are representing the
Ghana National Association of Garages.
Very well. So, what do you make in the first place of this particular policy that government intends introduce?
Well, PowerPoint presentation, what the man said in his, was it an hour presentation? It was very, very good. But what we are facing, what we think we're facing as our challenges are that now we are switching fossil fuels, or is it diesel, petrol, to that of electric or electricity for power consumption or what is it. So now the question I'm asking is that, is government going to give us training, an intensive training, so that at the end of the day, these our mechanics who are into vehicle, who are into petrol and then that of diesel engines will now learn something in order to switch themselves or adjust themselves to that of the electric cars. That's another thing, because when they were switching from manual cars, as the doctor said, they gave us an intensive training, which we went through, and then some of them now can repair these electronic cars. But now, if he's saying Zoom Lion will now come up with the training, I think government of Ghana should come in to also help, so that at the end of the day, they will organize the program in a mammoth way, so that at the end of the day, we'll all benefit and we'll learn how to switch from that, we'll have an intensive training from these vehicles to that of electronics, so that people will know how to repair those cars. Otherwise, if it is imported, we'll face a lot of challenges. Imagine is going to quench fire. Let's take the fire service and their car break on the way. We are those that they are coming to call and will go and service it. If we don't go through an intensive training, at the end of the day, they will start somewhere.
So what do you expect to be included in the draft policy?
Yes, in the draft policy, they should include, government of Ghana should include an intensive training for us, not only limited to Zoom Lion, because in his presentation, he says Zoom Lion will help us undergo training. But government of Ghana should work in tandem with that of Zoom Lion and other collaborative agencies, so that at the end of the day, it will be a mammoth one for all mechanics, all electricians in Ghana that are into this vehicle work.
So what would you want to tell your members regarding this particular policy government?
Yes, what I will tell my members is that, as doctor said, change is inevitable. No matter what, we'll always change time after time. And if you don't change, but change will change you. We're saying manual cars will not exist, and they cannot exist. Now they came to be. We're saying these cars, what is the name? Electronic cars will not exist. Now they came to exist. Now, these electric cars will come and stay. But my fear and worry is that they should look at the past. Those that are importing the car parts to the system. You know, demand and supply. Someone will go in to bring a pass that is less costly. So at the end of the day, you know, demand and supply. People rush into it for the fake one, which is not the one. So as they are bringing or they are introducing these electric cars, I'll echo that they should come with a pass that are the original pass and they are not the imitated pass, so that we'll be using.
Okay, so this is the representative of the Ghana
National Association of
Garages.
Upper West.
He says the policy is good if implemented well, but his fear is that the members must be given the necessary training so that when the system takes effect, they will be in a position to be able to work on the cars that will now be using batteries. And he's also saying that the pass that will be imported for the use for the yet to be introduced electric vehicles should also be genuine ones, so that they will not face problem of inferior pass that is likely to give them problems when the policy becomes, when the policy is implemented. So thank you very much, Rashid Jinson, for your time.
Thanks so much.
We'll be coming back to you later to find out when the policy is rolled out.
It's a pleasure.
We also have one of the participants. In fact, he is also a spare parts dealer. We would like to engage him to find out what are his expectations of this particular policy that government intends to introduce. Of course, that is the reason he's here, to listen to the draft policy and also speak his mind for the inclusion into the policy. Welcome to GBC News Live or Real Time. Tell us your full name and what you do.
Thank you very much. I'm Haruna Abdul-Sataru.
Can you speak a bit loudly?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Haruna Abdul-Sataru, and I am a spare parts dealer at One Magazine. My worry or my fear is that bringing the policy, it's not a problem to us. But the main issue is that if government is sure that the policy will be implemented, why not started with what? Training for some people that are working at magazine currently, so that when this policy has been implemented and the cars has come, they will be able to what? To fixing or working on them, such as repairs. But for me, purposely, I am a spare parts dealer, so I will emphasize on that. If these cars are able to come, and the old ones, or these ones that we are using now, they become old ones, so that we will not be able to what? To use them, or will no longer use them. What are some of the parts that we will be selling? For now, that is our business that we do for a living. So if the cars come and the parts are not yet in, it means we are going to what? Collapse in business. And we'll be waiting on government to bring them later on. And maybe by the time that they'll be implementing or they'll be bringing them, said that the capital we use in doing the business, if the capital runs down, it will not be easy to start up again. So my worry is that government should have what? Started bringing out maybe some petty parts that will be able to go through them, will know how to enter the system again.
Yeah, so some may argue that when government, new vehicles were being introduced, government didn't import parts for you as spare parts dealers. Why do you think government should introduce a pass or should bring in parts for you to sell?
Yes, I call government because if anything should come, it will pass through the government, such as taxes that we'll be paying. So if government should able to bring the taxes down, some of the parts will bring them ourselves and we'll be able to pay the taxes. But if you are able to buy the parts and bring them, and you are not able to pay the taxes, you bring it but you cannot use it. You can't sell it. There's no way you have access to it when you cannot pay the tax for it.
So you want the government to
Bring
organize
down the
training
taxes. Yes.
for you as mechanics and spare parts dealers.
Yes.
Government should also make sure that the pass for the e-vehicles that will be imported will be
the tax
should come down,
yes,
so that you will be able to import the pass,
yes,
and will not go out of business.
Yes. And one challenge too I have is that the station that will be charging the cars. If the stations are not many, due to the number of cars we have currently in the system, it is because we are using fuels that moves the cars. If the cars have been implemented and it happens that the station will now be charging the cars for it, why not make them in such a way that you can charge your car at your home? When you are going, you move out with it. Because the stations we have and the number of cars that are in the system, it doesn't tell you.
Okay, so you've been listening to a mechanic sharing his views on what the government intends to do regarding the introduction of the e-vehicles. He is saying that one, government needs to ensure that there will not be taxes on parts of the e-vehicles that government intends to introduce, or government should make the taxes so manageable so that they will not be out of business. They also need training to be able to ensure that when these e-vehicles break down, they will be able to fix them without much difficulties. And he also says that government should make it possible for them to be able to charge their vehicles at home and not necessarily at designated places where they have to drive to be able to do that. So for him, he agrees with the government introducing the e-vehicle policy. But before government does so, some of the concerns that he's raising must be addressed so that Ghana will move forward as a nation. So these vehicles that you see here, I stand for correction. I believe they are all using fuels. So the expectation is that in the very near future, all these vehicles we see here will switch over to the electronic vehicles so that the problem of emissions that we are told contributes significantly to climate change will be a thing of the past. Back to you in the studio. You have any question for me? Doctor is still here.
Thank you very much, Swala. So please,
Okay,
I just want to know, have they come up with the prices of some of the vehicles in the system already? Is it part of the policy?
Not to the best of my knowledge. What the resource person was saying is that there are some of the e-vehicles in the system in Ghana here, and some people have also set up stations where they can charge their batteries. But I understand the resource person to mean that government is not going to determine the prices of the vehicles that will be using the different source of power. But, it will be in a position to make sure that citizens are able to address challenges that will emanate as a result of the use of the e-vehicles. But as for importing the vehicles into the country, I don't think government is going to do so on a large scale. But once Ghana doesn't want to be left behind, as it has been in other cases, some have started using the electronic vehicles in Ghana here. And he also explained that Zoom Lion is retrofitting 3 of its vehicles on a test transmission basis to see how well it will go. If it comes out well, the company is going to convert all its over 1,000 vehicles into electronic vehicles so that it will contribute in reducing the emissions. And he said that the initial cost is a bit high, but when you are able to accommodate the initial cost, then the rest of the costs will begin to come down. And ultimately, you realize that you are able to save money when you use electric vehicles compared to the vehicles that use fossil fuel.
Swala, if government is
Yes.
making policies so that we can transition to electric vehicles, then I think the draft should also look at government coming in to help with the pricing so that majority of Ghanaians can afford. But what do you think?
Yeah, so doctor is still here. If you don't mind, let me pose that question to
yes,
doctor.
Yes, please do.
Doctor, a question from my uncle, that whether government is going to subsidize the e-vehicles to make them affordable for Ghanaians once government wants people to switch over to that one.
I think it's one of the policy strategies that we are discussing as a country. We can't decide, okay, well, we are not so interested or we don't have the means. We know we are in dire straits. Recently, we are having some economic challenges, so we can say we don't want to do anything about it. That's one scenario, one school of thought. There are some school of thought that believe that, well, as I did indicate, the initial upfront cost is very expensive. You're going to buy directly, it's expensive. Over time, you'll be compensated, right? So the total cost of ownership of EVs over time pays for itself. So you shouldn't even intervene. You should just allow market demand and supply. Mind you, the argument from that school of thought is already, I said the DVL already has data to suggest that about 17,000 plus battery electric vehicles are in the system. That's one school of thought. But then there's another school of thought that believes, okay, as a country, can we not have some subsidies? Can we not have some monetary, non-monetary, as it were, incentives to incentivize the upscale, the general uptake of the EV as a transition, as a country? And so this project, we are switching views. Beyond that, the Ministry of Finance and other interested sister allied ministries would have to partner and say what are the giveaways. Because certainly, for instance, if we transition, for instance, now you know when you buy fuel, I think there's a component that goes into taxation for development. Government is going to lose that. How do we compensate for that? There's a school of thought, okay, so now what if we also look at the lithium that we have and then make sure we add value, we make this a hub for EV battery production. So certainly there's going to be a trade-off. There might be a loss temporarily, but in the long term, government stands to benefit.
So as we speak now, the policy doesn't have a component where government considers subsidy for people who want to buy EV.
So at this stage, there are several stages involved. I began by saying that we've done some household surveys in the country. We generated the draft. Now we are sharing with Ghanaians. The feedback from all the regions indicate that, well, not to promote that, many of us cannot really, pay for that initial high upfront cost. So we need subsidies. Now from here, we now, send to other, if you like. So it doesn't lie within the Ministry of Transport to say, give subsidy by this much or this margin. We only can propose. And then the ministry that has the mandates, Ministry of Finance in particular, Energy Commission is also involved. There are other allied ministries. They have to sit and create the models. They sit behind the purse. I don't sit there. Yeah. But certainly, some subsidy would have to be given. Yeah. All over the world, countries that have done this successfully have had to introduce some subsidies.
Okay, doctor, let me take a little bit of your time.
Yes.
What about those who use motorbikes? What is going to happen to them?
So there is an element, a component, as I said, there's also a retrofitting aspect of motorbikes. When we came here, I realized that within a northern part of the country, motor bicycles are used as the primary means of going around. So certainly, the transition to electric vehicle, the transition to using the motor, to power batteries to power their vehicle is also going to affect that as well. I already indicated that Solar Taxi, as a company here, is a private entity in our country. They're already retrofitting. They're also locally assembling their own electric motorcycles. When it comes to Accra in particular, the number of courier services that rely on these motorcycles, I think it's e-scooters that we are not really considering as a policy, but motorcycles is part of it.
So if I understand you well, what it means is that I use a motorbike. If I'm going to Hamilton, I have to carry an extra battery?
I don't think that is it. So just imagine initially when we were transitioning from the use of basic phones, what we call today as YAM, to the smartphones as we do have them. There was a lot of, anxiety, right? It took a while, but that change eventually came. You don't need to take an extra battery. There are countries that have already transitioned. They are using motorcycle, for instance. You just have to charge, and then once you set off, you are going. And of course, it gives you indication as to how much energy you've spent and how much remains. So just a matter of just topping up, as it were.
So, Doctor continues to allay the fears of Ghanaians that even though it's relatively new in Ghana, the challenges being identified will be surmounted. And we are hoping that when the policy takes off, a lot of education would have been done so that people could not run into crisis, as people are saying. Here, majority of the people use motorbikes,
Yes, exactly.
and they go into remote areas where sometimes you can even get filling stations. So it's going to be one of the challenges that government needs to look at so that the implementation of this policy will not disadvantage the deprived in this part of the region. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you very much, Suala. Thank you very much. So that was Upper West Regional Correspondent Suala Abdul-wahab engaging participants at the Electric Vehicle Policy Stakeholder Meeting in WA. They say it has become necessary for Ghana to toe this line, basically to help change the narrative of climate change in our part of the world. And we've also heard that about 17,600 plug-in vehicles have so far been registered by the DVLA, and they are already in the system. We pray that the policy will help everybody own an electric vehicle one day. So that's how we draw the curtain on today's edition.